My name is Janet. I'm 28 years old. If someone had told me 5 years ago that my biggest mistake would be letting my husband's sister into our marriage, I would have laughed. Johnny and I had what people called the perfect relationship: steady jobs, a cozy home, and a kind of love that felt ordinary but safe, the kind you thought would last forever. Until she came back into the picture. Her name is Fiona, Johnny's childhood best friend, the girl next door who grew up with him. They went to the same daycare, the same schools, even the same college. To him, she was family. To me, she was the shadow that refused to leave our marriage. The first time I met her, she smiled and said, "So you're the new leading lady in Johnny's life. Cute makeup, trying to impress me." She laughed, but her eyes were sharp enough to draw blood. Johnny just rolled his eyes and said, "That's Fiona for you. She jokes like that with everyone." But she didn't. I watched her for months, how she'd sit too close, how she'd text him late at night, and how she'd call him brother with the kind of tone that didn't sound sisterly at all. Still, I tried to be the bigger person. I told myself she was harmless, that maybe I was just insecure. Johnny would tell me, "You'll warm up to her, Janet. She's an acquired taste. She's blunt, but she doesn't mean any harm." So I swallowed my pride and smiled through every subtle insult she threw my way. "You're lucky Johnny likes simple girls," she'd say. Or, "He's always liked blondes. You fit the type." I'd laugh it off, but every time she opened her mouth, I felt myself shrinking a little smaller in my own home. Then Fiona met Eddie, a guy she found on a dating app. Within a year, they were engaged. Johnny couldn't stop talking about how happy he was for her. He even joked about having a joint wedding. I put a stop to that immediately. I remember saying, "Fiona's taste and mine are too different." He didn't argue, but something flickered in his expression that unsettled me. A month later, they married just after us. For a while, everything seemed fine. Fiona stopped calling so often. Johnny stopped comparing me to her. We started to feel like a couple again. But there was always a sliver of unease in my heart, something that whispered, "This peace won't last." And I was right. 4 years later, Fiona's marriage crumbled. Her husband left her after finding out she couldn't have children. And when Johnny told me she was going through something tragic, I didn't realize what kind of storm he was about to invite into our lives. He said softly, "She just needs support, Janet. She's like my sister. We can't turn our backs on her now." I didn't answer. I just stared at the woman sitting in my living room. Her eyes red from crying, but her lips curled in a faint smile when she caught me looking. Something in that moment told me Fiona's grief wasn't going to ruin her life. It was going to ruin mine. Fiona moved into our guest room on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Johnny carried her suitcase up the stairs, while she trailed behind him pretending to protest. "Oh, Johnny, you really don't have to," she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound fragile. He smiled like a hero. "You do the same for me, Fee." That nickname, Fee. He hadn't called her that in years. Hearing it again made something twist in my stomach. I told myself it was temporary, that once she recovered from her heartbreak, she'd go back to her own life. But a week passed, then 2, then a month. And the longer she stayed, the more she took from me space, peace, and my husband's attention. Every day she found a new way to criticize me. "This curry's too salty," she'd say, pushing her plate away. Or, "These curtains make the room feel small, don't they, Johnny?" And Johnny, instead of defending me, would chuckle. "She's just particular about decor. You know that." I started eating my meals alone in the kitchen. It was easier than pretending I didn't notice the way Fiona leaned toward him at dinner, the way she filled our home with her perfume, her laughter, her stories of the old days. Sometimes I'd walk past their conversation and hear my name mid-sentence, always followed by silence when I entered the room. One night I found them watching a movie on the couch. Fiona's head rested lightly on Johnny's shoulder. When I stopped in the doorway, they didn't even flinch. "She had another panic attack," he explained calmly. I didn't want to leave her alone. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But there was something off about the way Fiona looked at him, like she was testing the limits of what she could get away with. I tried to talk to him privately later. "Johnny, this isn't normal," I said, keeping my voice steady. "She's not your responsibility." He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "She's fragile right now. Her husband abandoned her, Janet. You'd want someone to help you if you were in her place, wouldn't you?" I bit back the truth that I wasn't in her place, that I was his wife. But in that moment, arguing felt pointless. I'd been here before, years ago, when we were dating. Fiona had always won these silent battles without ever raising her voice. A few nights later, I woke up at 2 a.m. Johnny wasn't in bed. My first thought was that he couldn't sleep. But when I stepped into the hallway, I saw a faint light under the guest room door. I stood there frozen, listening. Fiona's voice broke the silence. It's strange, isn't it? You and me talking like this again. Feels like old times. I waited for him to say something, anything to set a boundary, but his reply came soft and careful. Yeah, it does. That was the night something inside me cracked. The next morning, I said nothing. I cooked breakfast, smiled at both of them, and went to work. But the calmness I felt wasn't peace. It was the calm that comes before a storm. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't about sympathy anymore. Fiona wasn't healing. She was rebuilding herself inside my marriage. It happened on a Thursday evening, one of those gray, heavy days, when the sky felt like it was pressing down on the house. I came home early from work, hoping to cook something warm and simple for dinner. But when I walked through the door, the house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that hides secrets. At first, I thought they'd gone out. Then I noticed something strange, Johnny's gym bag sitting in the hallway, half-zipped and full of his clothes. His watch, usually on the nightstand, was missing. A few steps later, I found him in the guest room. He was folding his shirts, placing them neatly into Fiona's dresser. For a moment, I couldn't even speak. "What are you doing?" I asked. He didn't look guilty. He didn't even look startled. "Moving in here," he said simply. "Fiona's been having panic attacks. I need to be close in case she wakes up screaming again." Fiona sat on the edge of the bed pretending to cry. But there was something performative about the way her fingers trembled as she brushed a non-existent tear. I felt the air leave my lungs. "In the same room, Johnny. Are you hearing yourself?" He looked at me with that infuriating calm that made me feel like I was the unreasonable one. "She's like my sister Janet. Please don't make this something it isn't." Fiona looked up then, meeting my eyes for the first time in weeks, and she smiled. Just a flicker, but it was there. My hands shook so hard I had to hold the doorframe. "If you sleep in this room with her, you won't be my husband anymore." He sighed, exasperated. "You always think the worst of people. Can't you be compassionate for once?" Compassion. That word hit me like a slap. I'd spent weeks cooking for her, tolerating her insults, giving up my privacy, and he thought I wasn't compassionate enough. Something inside me went still. All the anger, the humiliation, the ache, it crystallized into something cold and sharp. I smiled. "You're right," I said softly. "I understand completely." He blinked, confused by my tone. Fiona's fake crying stopped. I turned, walked calmly back to our bedroom, and opened the drawer of my nightstand. Inside was the house deed my father had given me years ago, back when this house was mine alone. When I came back to the guest room, they were still staring at each other, mid-whisper. I held up the papers. "Since you two seem so comfortable together, I said you can take your little arrangement somewhere else. Maybe the street, maybe a hotel, but not here." Johnny's face went pale. "Janet, this isn't funny." "I'm not joking." He tried to laugh it off. "You can't just—" "I can," I interrupted, stepping closer, my voice steady. "This house is mine, my name, my deed. And I'm done being a guest in it." For the first time, Fiona dropped her act. "You're evil," she hissed. "You've always been jealous of us." Maybe I said, my lips barely moving. But at least I'm not pathetic enough to hide behind panic attacks to get attention. Johnny's expression hardened. "You're being cruel. She's sick." I tilted my head. "Then take care of her somewhere else." There was a long silence, the kind that fills the space between a life you've lived and the one that's about to begin. And then slowly Johnny packed the last of his things. Fiona wiped her fake tears and glared at me as she walked out. The door slammed behind them. For a moment I stood in the hallway, listening to the echo fade. My hands were shaking, but my voice was calm when I whispered to myself, "Let them comfort each other. They'll need it." The silence after they left was deafening. It should have felt peaceful. Finally, my house was my own again. But peace doesn't come that easily after betrayal. It was the kind of silence that rang in your ears, reminding you that you'd lost something you couldn't name. At first, I thought I could just move on. I washed the sheets, aired out the guest room, and told myself it was over. But the real war hadn't even begun. It started with the messages. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, old friends, Johnny's coworkers, even people I barely knew. "You didn't have to kick them out like that, Janet. She's going through a divorce and you made her homeless. Johnny was only trying to help a friend." Each message was the same word for word, almost rehearsed. He was turning everyone against me. At first I ignored them, but then his mother called. Her voice was dripping with disappointment. "I told Johnny you were a sensitive girl," she said, "but I didn't think you were heartless." I hung up without replying, then blocked her number. That night, I sat in the dark living room with my phone face down on the table, breathing in the quiet. I thought about how easily people believed him, how quickly they turned on me like I was some villain in his sob story. Maybe that's what I was now, the jealous wife, the cruel woman who threw out a grieving friend. But they didn't see what I saw. They didn't see Fiona watching me with those smug little smiles or Johnny's eyes lighting up whenever she entered the room. They didn't know that I'd been sleeping beside a man who'd already emotionally left me. The next morning, I received one last text from an unknown number. "You'll regret this when you find out what really happened that night." I stared at it for a long time, my heart racing. Who was it from Johnny Fiona? One of their friends. I deleted it, but it stayed in my mind like a seed that refused to die. Later that week, Johnny texted me himself. It was long rehearsed and full of justifications. "I still love you, Janet. I never had feelings for Fiona. She's like a sister to me. You misunderstood everything. I'm ready to come back home if you can apologize for how you treated her. Let's fix this before it's too late." He wanted me to apologize. I read that message a dozen times, each word twisting the knife a little deeper. For a moment, I wondered if he was right, if I'd been too harsh, too insecure, too emotional. That's how gaslighting works, isn't it? It makes you doubt your own memory of pain. But then I remembered the look on Fiona's face that night, the satisfaction, the quiet victory in her eyes as he carried his clothes into her room. And I realized something. Maybe I wasn't jealous. Maybe I was just the only one who saw the truth. Still, I didn't reply. I didn't block him either. I wanted him to see the silence he'd earned. By the end of the week, every trace of them was gone from my house, their cups, their laughter, their shadows. But inside me, they still lingered. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't end when the person leaves. It ends when the voice in your head finally stops asking if you were overreacting. And mine hadn't stopped yet. 2 weeks passed before Johnny came back. It was a rainy evening, the kind that blurs everything outside your window. I was curled up on the couch with a blanket when the doorbell rang. The sound jolted me like a memory I didn't want. I opened the door, and there he was. He looked thinner, tired, like someone who hadn't been sleeping, but his eyes still held that familiar mix of guilt and confidence, as if he'd already decided that I would forgive him. "Janet," he said softly, "can we talk?" Every part of me wanted to slam the door, but curiosity, or maybe unfinished anger, made me step aside. He came in like he still belonged there, looked around, breathed in the space. "You rearranged the living room," he said quietly. "I made room," I replied. He sat across from me, wringing his hands. "I'm not here to fight. I just want to talk like adults." So I let him talk. He said he missed me, that he couldn't sleep without me, that Fiona was just a friend and I had misread everything, that he never meant to hurt me. The same excuses, the same tone, the same words he'd always used to make me doubt myself. I stayed silent until he looked up and said, "You have to admit, Janet, you overreacted." That was when I finally spoke. "Johnny, if you thought I was overreacting, why are you here to win or to apologize?" He blinked, caught off guard. "To fix things. To make you understand that I still love you." I leaned back, studying his face. "Then prove it." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "I might reconsider the divorce," I said slowly, "if you promise me one thing." His shoulders straightened with sudden hope. "Anything." "Cut contact with Fiona. Completely. No calls, no texts, no visits. Delete her number, block her on everything. Choose her or me." The words hung between us like a blade. He didn't answer. He just stared at me, his mouth opening, then closing again. His silence said more than words ever could. Finally, he exhaled. "That's not fair. She's my oldest friend. She's family." I nodded. That's what I thought. He leaned forward, his voice rising. "You can't ask me to abandon someone who's already been abandoned by everyone else. She needs me." "And what about me?" I asked quietly. "When did I stop needing you?" The question landed like a stone. He couldn't look me in the eye. "So this is it," he whispered. "After everything we've been through." "This," I said, gesturing around the room, "is what we've been through. You crossed a line and called it compassion. You broke my trust and called it loyalty. You let someone else live in our home in my marriage, and you still can't see what's wrong with that." He stood up angry now. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'll regret it alone." He didn't speak again. He just left, closing the door with the same quiet he used to shut down every argument we'd ever had. A few days later, the divorce papers were served. He didn't contest them. We met again in court weeks later, 6 months before finalization, as required by law. He approached me after the session, hands in his pockets, that same ghost of a smile. "I'll wait," he said. "If these 6 months change your mind, I'll still be here." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I said, "Then I guess you'll be waiting a long time." And I walked away without looking back. But deep down, I knew Johnny wasn't finished. Not yet. It had been a little over a month since the court hearing. I'd begun rebuilding my life piece by piece, small routines, new silence, and mornings without Johnny's shadow in the kitchen. For the first time in years, the air in my house felt like it belonged to me. Then one evening, the doorbell rang again. When I opened the door, Johnny was standing there, rain dripping from his hair, his eyes swollen and red. For a split second, I thought he was drunk, but then I realized he'd been crying. He didn't wait for me to speak. He just stumbled inside, clutching a small duffel bag and shaking his head like he couldn't believe something. "Janet," he said hoarsely, "I was wrong about everything." I froze. "What are you talking about?" He dropped the bag to the floor and sank onto the couch like a man who'd run out of strength. "Fiona, you were right about her all along." He covered his face with his hands. His voice broke when he spoke again. She tried to make a move on me. Yesterday, I was in my room at my parents' house, and she came in crying, saying she couldn't stand being alone. I thought she just needed to talk, but then He stopped, swallowing hard. "She tried to kiss me." "Janet." I said nothing. I just watched him crumble. He went on, words spilling like confession. When I pushed her away, she said I'd been leading her on for years, that I'd always given her hope, that I never should have married you. She called me a coward. I couldn't tell if it was guilt or humiliation that made him tremble. Maybe both. I told her she was wrong, he said, looking up at me, that she was like a sister to me, nothing more. And she lost it, started yelling, crying, saying she hated me. Then she packed her things and left. I think she's back at her parents' now. He shook his head. "I needed to tell you. You were right, Janet, every damn time. I didn't see it until it was too late." The room went still. The only sound was the clock ticking on the wall. For years, I dreamed of hearing those words, "You were right." But standing there listening to him fall apart, I didn't feel victorious. I just felt tired. He leaned forward, pleading, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know the truth." I sat down across from him. My voice came out quiet, almost detached. "Johnny, do you realize what you put me through? You let me think I was paranoid. You made me feel insane for seeing what was right in front of us." "I know," he whispered, "and I hate myself for it." There was sincerity in his eyes, real pain. But that didn't undo the nights I spent questioning my own worth. Maybe I said softly, "You loved me, but you never respected me. And love without respect is just another kind of cruelty." He closed his eyes. "You're right again." We sat in silence for a long time. Then, without another word, he stood up and walked to the door. This time, he didn't promise to wait. He didn't look back. After he left, I stayed there staring at the door. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air smelled new. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of tea, and sat by the window. For the first time, I didn't feel angry or broken. I just felt free. People always talk about closure like it's something someone else gives you. But I think closure is just the moment you finally stop needing answers. Johnny lost his marriage, Fiona lost her mask, and me. I found my peace in the ruins.